my friend, so I didn't really know the difference with about type, lettering, all those little nuances. I had no idea about them until my friend in high school, who is not a designer now, he's a management graduate from Ateneo, and he asked me, do you know the difference between Arial and Helvetica? And then I wasn't really sure if there was a difference. They looked like clone faces to me. And I don't know if anyone in the crowd can tell me a specific difference between Arial and Helvetica. Yeah?
The
Yeah.
the C is going to be different between Arial and the R.
Yep.
And yeah, also the lowercase r, the uppercase r.
So, yeah. So those are a few differences about with Arial and Helvetica. For one thing, just a short history lesson. Helvetica, as far as I've read, it was taken from accidents, grotesque. It was like the perfection of a certain design. And then Microsoft didn't want to pay for the license to use Helvetica in their computers. So they had a clone face developed called Arial. So if you have a whole page set in Helvetica and you open it in a Windows computer, which normally doesn't have Helvetica, it'll just be reset in Arial. So most people don't really care about this. But I think the nice thing about when you get into type is that you start to notice these little things, like the terminal on the R and the R here, how it ends vertically. On the E's, it ends horizontally, while in Arial it ends at a diagonal. Can you see that? The diagonal terminal here compared to the horizontal terminal on Helvetica. So there's these little details that I think in any profession, whether it's web design or print design, or even as an engineer, these little details that start to pop up, they help you appreciate details in general. And it's one of those things that you can't unsee, I think. It's like Robert Brinkhurst described when he discovered typography. It's like the heavens opened up and he saw this thing that he was meant to be into. That's kind of how I felt, because these are like these little things, these little artworks that you see on everything. That they progress with the art movements. You know, there are Renaissance typefaces.
And if you remove everything, leave just the font, it already conveys a lot of meaning what font you use.
Goes into how much history each one of them has. So this Arial versus Helvetica, this was like my awakening to type
Very
and lettering.
important. It's very sad.
And then my friends
It's hard
started
to communicate with the font.
so we started to do it on our test papers in school. So our teachers have their favorite fonts that they like to use. So our teachers have these favorite fonts that they like to use. So for example, my teacher would always set her tests in, does anyone know what this one is? The one that, not this first one. This is Tahoma. So Tahoma and Verdana are almost clone faces as well. I think one of them is wider, one of them is used for the web. So Tahoma is, you know, my teacher was my teacher's favorite typeface, well, font for setting in tests, and we just started to notice that her tests look different from the other teachers who used Arial. This is again a little detail that most other people aren't going to care about, but it was me starting to notice these little details. Okay, the second one is, can anyone guess this one? Trebuchet is what was said.
Trebuchet with the G.
So, Trebuchet, interestingly enough, I mean, I think everyone here has heard about all the anger towards Comic Sans, no? Yeah? So, interestingly enough, the designer of Trebuchet is the same designer as Comic Sans.
Comic Sans.
Vincent Conner, and he said that people who hate Comic Sans, no, people who like Comic Sans don't know much about typography. And then he said people who hate Comic Sans also don't know much about typography.
True.
So it's funny because a lot of people kind of just jump on the bandwagon like, yeah, Comic Sans sucks because, you know, you used it when you were in grade school. I used Comic Sans when I was in grade school. Comic Sans was awesome in grade school. But there's little details, I guess, why people start to hate them because it was so widespread. And then now everyone just hates it, but maybe we don't know reasons. So if you guys know the site comicsanscriminal.com, it's a quick way to show people who don't know why Comic Sans is bad, why Comic Sans is bad. So once again, so it's Arial versus Helvetica. I finally got the difference, and then we started to notice the typefaces on our test exams. And now, when I'm reading a text, it's difficult to not look at the typeface first before looking at the content. Sometimes when I'm at mass and I'm reading the Misalet, I start to look at the typeface and I should stop. No. And then this is like why? No, it's interesting. So, so from here, I was starting to like type and I knew like calligraphy, and then design looked like something that I wanted to get into. I started to read a few books. First was this one, Essential Principles of Graphic Design. It was this book where they got a bunch of case studies of designers and how they approached the work and what they did. And it blew my mind in terms of what graphic designers did. I thought design was this little thing. And then it was like this whole world that I hadn't been introduced to in high school. And I wish more high school students got introduced to it earlier so that they could see how beautiful it can be. And during the start, they talked about the principles, and the first one was discussed, one of the first that was discussed was typography by Marian Banjis. And she talked about it so passionately, almost like she said that she felt physical pain when people used wrong typographic codes. So, speaking of which, So, for example, these are called smart codes. They curve toward the letters that they're opening to. But in another, let's say in other softwares that aren't OpenType ready, you'll see this a lot. So you see this a lot. In fact, you see it in Facebook all the time. You see it so much in the web that you think that, oh, those are codes, they're the same thing. But they're not the same thing. They're called primes, and they're used for inches and feet. Okay? So that's all they're used for, and in mathematical symbols and things like that. But just as a note, you should know that these are called smart codes, and there's a way to enable them on the web. There's different ways, like Markdown does it automatically. Markdown's this language that, yeah, I'm sure you guys heard of. But anyway, it just corrects those things when you're setting text. Once again, another detail that I think it's good that we all start to notice more and more. So there's a shortcut for the smart codes on the Mac. I think it's, also there's a shortcut. It's so that you can be like you can type your things on Facebook and use the proper smart codes, and then in your heart you'll know that you're practicing proper typography. So, and then I read, this is supposed to be the Bible of typography, Elements of Typographic Style. It's a bit of a play on the words of Elements of Style by yeah. And so Robert Brinkhurst, who's a poet, wrote this, Elements of Typographic Style. It's kind of boring if you're not into type. Like, it's hard to get through. I haven't read the whole thing yet, but it's very interesting the way he talks about it. And that's like a way to get really all the ground rules set, and then you can start to break them. So, having said all this, one last thing before we move on to the project I'm about to show you. Just a short way of, maybe we should differentiate between these three things. So you have type, typography, and lettering. So type is, when you say a typeface, this is a thing a lot of people, well, more and more people know, but it's not the same as a font. Okay, so a font, which is difficult for us to kind of get our heads around now because a font is not the same thing as it used to be. So in Acer's video, you can see that he was, you can see these little metal pieces fall in, which were punched into a slab. So those little metal pieces, those were a font. Okay, those were part of a font. So a font is this collection of letters of a typeface only in one size. So 8-point Helvetica Neue bold, that's a font. Helvetica Neue as a whole, that's a type family, but the design is the typeface. So you get it? So if you look at words and you say, hey, that's a nice typeface, that's how you should say it. But then if you say nice font, you're referring to the tool he used to get it on. Does that make any sense? Again, so before, the font was the physical piece. The typeface is the design. So some guy says, I have this idea for a great typeface. So he draws the design, and then a punch cutter makes it into a font. Yeah, that's clear? So now, the fonts we use are digital files, .odf, .ttf, those are font files. So now that's what we call a font. But the typeface is the design that the font encapsulates. Okay? So next, so that's typeface, and type design is making those. Typography, on the other hand, is kind of loosely used as an umbrella term to refer to all things about letters, but technically, typography is the use of typefaces in layout or whatever you have. So, for example, if you're setting your school paper where they force you to use 12-point Times New Roman, whoa, okay, that's supposed to be typography. But you know, Times New Roman is like, anyway, that's a different story altogether. But so typography is using type in layout, things like that. That's typography. Lettering is, it's like the custom version of these things. When you're drawing letters, that's lettering. Calligraphy is writing. So you can write letters and then you can draw letters. If you have really nice handwriting and you know how to use a dip pen to do all that, technically that's calligraphy because you're writing it. But lettering would consist of, you know, building up strokes. You know, if you, graffiti maybe would be closer to lettering. But calligraphy is still writing, but lettering is like drawing the letters. Okay, so that's just to set those things apart. So considering all that, my love, the love that I developed for type, and all that, I eventually I decided to. This is like my thesis presentation in school. Just defended yesterday, actually.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I was looking around, you know, the city, and at first I looked around at the lettering on jeepneys and cabs. You know, I think we all notice it, but we kind of just dismiss it. Like it just shows the information anyway. And actually, I found it quite ugly. I thought, you know, I mean, here's like calligraphy and lettering, you see it, but then this is kind of dinky. Like sometimes the letters seem to dance. It's not very beautiful. But then I started to really look at it, and I found that, you know, I think it has its own flavor. Like, so it started, like I said, there's an introduction, this curiosity and the love for type. And I started to notice, for example, this is beautiful. I think it's beautiful.
Yeah.
This is, and you know, it's redundant. All taxis have air cons. Thanks for the information. But you know, and there's a bunch of different kinds of ways that they write aircon. One time I saw it done in lowercase, and it was so beautiful. And it's always in script, well, sometimes it's in bold. I started to look at the pedicab, lettering, and I found this the most ugly initially. And then I found it the most beautiful eventually. I think it has the most potential for a type family. And I hope one day to make it into a type family, because like, you know, I think it's got a good skeleton. You could come up with a light version, bold version. I did some sketches, but they never really. And then I saw like ice cream cart lettering, which was the most playful. And with all these letters, they all seem to kind of make a reference to Western lettering and type, but then they had their own Filipino twist to it. Just all hand-lettered signs. This was, you know, it's what you see in the Jeeps for the route cards and stuff. So considering that love, I wanted to spread the love. So I made this website, which initially started as this website had initially started as so this website used to be another site called Urban Type Manila. So this was my web development class 1, and we were told to look into. So we had to do articles, and we had to do like intramuros. Okay, we had to do like 5 articles of intramuros. Like, I mean, who hasn't read about intramuros? Okay, it's like the most overused. I mean, intramuros is beautiful. Okay, but I didn't want to write. I didn't want to go to intramuros again. You can get that stuff ready online. I asked my professor if I could do articles on different things. So I did this, and I interviewed some lettering artists, letterers, and I asked them about their process, how they got into it, which is all, it looks a little bit better in fancy letter. So it's called fancy letter because, well, for one thing, my advisors didn't like the term urban type Manila because apparently lettering is all around the Philippines. They didn't even want me to use the term lettering because apparently lettering is dead. This is digital lettering. I was offended by that. So fancy letter, it came from, I was talking to Manong Silverio. He was one of the people I interviewed, and I asked him what he called the single stroke letters. So you know the ones you see in the jeeps, the one for the root cars, and the ones that look like they've obviously been done with a brush. It's called single stroke because you just go at it once. You don't build up the letters. But he called it single stroke fancy letter. That's how he referred to it. And so I realized that he meant fancy letter. But I like that he said fancy letter.
Yes.
It felt like it encapsulated the whole project's thrust in that here was this lettering that kind of had its own flavor, but you could obviously see how it was connected to other lettering, but it had a distinct taste. So that's, fancy, but it's fancy. So I kept the name Fancy Letter. And so this is the interview of it. It's on fancyletter.com if you guys want to check it out. There's this video of Manong Silverio that I did. I also got 2 videos from 2 different lettering artists. And yeah, they told me about what they did. So he answered all my questions. He even did some lettering for me. For the initial site, I asked him to do the lettering for the first few panels for Urban Type Manila, and he did that. He was nice enough to do that. It's really cheap actually to get them to do lettering. I mean, if I had to do the same thing, I'd probably charge like 500 for a single panel. But he charged like a small sign that says "Show My for Sale." It's like 50 pesos.
Wow.
And the vendors probably were like trying to make tawad.
Wow.
So yeah, it's 50 pesos, and their muscle memory is so amazing. Like if you look in the first article, he doesn't even sketch them. Like I noticed when they use a pencil, the lettering kind of gets a bit wonky because they're so used to a brush. So when he doesn't sketch, he just kind of he made marks on the panel. They paint on old Venetian blinds. Like there's this junk cart guy who comes by his shop, and his shop, by the way, is just on the side of Buendia. It's not even a real shop. He's just on the side of the street, and you can see that his stuff keeps changing because the MMDA comes and collects his stuff because it's technically not supposed to be there. So the first time he had like part of a motorcycle seat on top of a can for his seat, and then the next time he had like a box. And I said, "Hey, Mano, bago yung seat niya." I said, "Di, na kinuha kasi ng MMDA yung kasi yeah, he's not supposed to be there." He doesn't have a real shop, but yeah. So and their muscle memory is amazing. So he takes the panel and then he makes like marks with a pencil for where roughly where the letters should be, and then they just do it. They do it so automatically. They've done it so much. They have to do it fast. As the other interviewer said, the other interviewee said, they have to do it fast because if they do it too slow, the drivers will say, computerized na lang. So the computerized versions, I guess, are faster, but then again, you have to stick the stickers on. But yeah, so they have to do it fast or else the drivers complain. And it's kind of a dying art. More and more people are starting to opt for computer printed tarpaulins and things like that. Also, another thing I noticed is, I don't know if you guys know the typeface Cooper Black. It's used a lot. It's used too much actually. It's like the new Comic Sans. But you see it a lot in the Philippines, and I can't help but feel, this is a little, maybe it's going too far, but I can't help but feel that people may seem to like it because it looks a lot like their lettering. When they do serif forms, it's usually curved. So my theory is, because it's so connected to that hand letter feel, people feel comfortable when they use it to sign it. That's just my theory. So here's the video with mine.